Okay, in this part of the video, we're going to focus on your response checklist and review Blue Book number 16, your interpretive response versus a summary. In the first part, you probably had some review notes on what a summary is, but you want to focus this Blue Book entry on the question, what should an insightful interpretive response include? Basically, you have your notes from this side over here. So make sure that you have a comment that says, first of all, the response varies depending on what your instructor wants. So I'm going to give you a very typical model, but even for my different assignments, I might ask for you to focus on a different area. If you're not going to combine the response with a summary, you do need to start with some type of introductory statement like you would for a summary, stating the title and the author. But if this is going to be attached to a summary, there's no need to say it again in the article, Drug Altered Consciousness. So you're just going to start with your own comments then when you add the interpretive part. Key inclusion, what should it have? It should have insight beyond the author's ideas. You are not summarizing, you're connecting. So it should show connections between the reading and maybe other texts, other chapters. And in my example, I'll show you a connection to simply common knowledge. You should be focusing on the central point and major support of the article. It's easy to get off topic. You're making other connections, but you're still drawing them back to the original article. And again, it should not focus on simply you liked it or you didn't. Keep it at a higher level college type of response, showing critical thinking and making those connections. Okay, I'm going to go back over here. Here's my summary. And as I read it, I notice the focus is on how today's drug situation differs. But as I'm reading, I'm saying, okay, I can see how it's changed. And even in the U.S., motives used to be more religious, family traditions, but now social, recreational settings, and often leading to addiction. So I think for the U.S., that's a key area there I'd like to connect to. And something I was thinking is really what a sad state we have gotten into as a result of these types of drugs getting stronger, and simply the economy and crime centered around it. So as I read this, I'm thinking, how can I focus my connection on that area? The authors themselves concluded by saying how many Americans still use drugs and risk their health smoking and the health of others in spite of the risks. So that's going to be my springboard. Becomes like a transitional statement. So I'll just give you a little start here. This is what I'm thinking as my thesis here. Nowadays, the negative social and economic effects of drug use are as serious as the personal health consequences. That's the area that I would like to focus my comments on. I'm going to lead into that by replying to this and transitioning into my response. Summaries up here, my personal response here. I do not need to say, I am going to start writing a personal response. The reader just knows that that's what I'm doing here. So here's my introduction, or how I start. It is hard to understand why so many Americans continue to ignore the well-noted health risks of smoking and using dangerous drugs. In high school, we were all repeatedly warned that most teenagers who smoke would still be smoking 10 years later, and that smokers are much more likely to smoke marijuana and even more likely to use cocaine. Yet given the incredible high cost of tobacco and drugs today, I am surprised that the use is still so high. Okay, now this is the case where I gave some facts, but pretty much for a high school graduate today, you've heard over and over and over again just how smoking leads to other types of drugs. So that to me is common knowledge. You could look it up and cite it. It would be really easy to find some type of source that could say that. For purpose here, I'm fine with you calling it common knowledge. Okay, then I would lead into my point here. Nowadays, the negative social and economic effects of drug use are a series of the personal health consequences. Many argue that many of the more dangerous effects could be controlled if they were legalized. I have a comment to continue to connect the drug article to other material you have been learning in your course or through assigned research. When you get this type of assignment from your other classes, your instructor is usually going to ask you to connect to a certain item in the chapter, a certain theory, something like that, or it might be part of your research. So I'm just going to leave it with that. If you do apply it to research other areas, you're going to need to include a little citation where it came from. Okay, for this week's assignment, you're going to do an interpretive response to the extra large please reading. You'll look over that outline. Keep in mind the central point was talking about the central point focused on what was causing child obesity to increase. And then throughout the article, the author gives what she believes the main causes to be, as well as some solutions. As you're reading that, you should be making connections to today. So what I'm looking for when you do your extra large please response is that you are not simply saying, yeah, she's right, I see lots of fat kids out there. You're not just simply going to agree with her. Don't even add, yeah, my brother's fat. That's proof. She doesn't need any more support for what she said. What you need to do now is say, okay, as I'm reading that, it makes me think of something else that's happening today. It makes me to connect to something that's happening today or since, what I know from schools. And with that reading, you really can't read it without thinking, wow. So I want you to do that, and go ahead and write your response and put it under your summary, and use this model over here to help guide you. Doesn't have to be really long. In fact, just a couple of paragraphs like this, a little bit more, will be just fine for your response. Okay? As usual, contact me if you have any questions.